The unbelievable battles of the Bible, hidden conflicts from Genesis to Revelation revealed. Few knew what truly happened that night in the shadowy valley, just outside Jerusalem. Dark thunders rolled overhead while the winds howled, carrying whispers of an ancient conflict. Something monumental was brewing beneath the surface, unseen by most eyes. That night, a lone figure stood amidst the chaos. David, young but fierce, gripped his slingshot tightly. He could feel the pulse of battle thrumming in his veins. Just beyond the ridge lay Goliath, a giant cloaked in armor. His growl echoed through the valley, chilling the bones of those who dared to listen. This confrontation was not just another skirmish, it was destiny weaving its tapestry with bold threads of fear and resolve. In the ancient land of Israel, filled with promise and peril, every rock and hill carried stories of trials. Centuries of struggles had led to this moment. David was not merely a shepherd, he was a symbol of hope, faced against the clamor of a mighty foe. How could a boy, slight of frame and heart beating wildly, challenge a titan of war? The question lingered, riding the gusty winds like a forgotten prayer. With each fetal step, David's heart raced, each thud felt like the beat of war drums. The others quaked in their armor, reflecting his courage through their own trembling hands. Yet, their eyes betrayed them, the weight of expectation hung heavily. Murmurs floated around, "He's just a child it'll end in ruin," but in the darkness, a flicker of light shone bright. David sensed the unseen hand that guided him, buoying his resolve, mingling with deep and resolute faith. Was it the air thick with anticipation or the breath of something divine? Tension filled the air as the two forces poised themselves, with destiny waiting to strike like a thunderbolt. What was to come? Would this young shepherd's courage catapult him to greatness, or would he crumble before the oppressive gaze of doom? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. In the brooding silence of the valley, where shadows danced under the ominous clouds, time seemed to stretch infinitely. David's heart echoed with the weight of the moment, a symphony of fear and determination. As he approached the clear expanse that separated him from the formidable Goliath, the clamor of the battlefield faded into a singular focus. Each thought he held whispered to him of his purpose, a mission not entirely his own but one that the divine seemed to enlist him for. Goliath's voice, an unyielding growl, called out again, taunting, challenging. "Who dares face me? Am I but a dog, that you come at me with sticks?" There was malice in his laughter, a scent of blood in the air as he relished the thought of crushing this insignificant boy. David halted, gripping his slingshot firmly while his mind searched the depths of his faith. How had he, a mere shepherd, come to bear this burden? He was not trained in battle, with no sword or armor to protect him against the wrath of a giant. Yet, he recalled the days under open skies, the battles he fought against lions and bears to protect his flock. It was those moments that ignited a flicker of understanding within him. It was more than mere physical prowess that guided him, it was the Spirit of the Lord. Taking a step forward, David raised his voice with a clarity that sliced through the chaos. "You come against me with sword and spear, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel." Today, the world will know that there is a God in Israel. The air shifted, a palpable tension locking eyes upon the young warrior. What was it like, standing there with faith as his only shield? David's heart beat not just for himself but for his people, for every Israelite trembling in despair and doubt. Yet the giant remained impervious, a formidable structure against the backdrop of David's youthful bravado. As David selected 5 smooth stones from the brook, his hands steady, each stone a promise of faith, pondered the deeper mystery unfolding. Was it truly about him defeating Goliath, or was it a revelation of greater truths? Whispers of history fell upon him like rain, tales of a covenant made with his ancestors lingered just beyond comprehension. This battle was a primal dance between light and darkness, fury and faith. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob breathed life into these moments, where the seemingly insignificant stood against the colossal. With a quick inhalation, David swung his slingshot expertly, aiming with care. The stone flew true, a simple projectile yet charged with the fervor of his spirit. What would happen next? Would it simply be the death of a giant, or the dawning of a new era for Israel? As the stone left his grasp, he felt the pull of destiny and perhaps something even more profound, yet, even as the air crackled with anticipation, one question hovered in the background. In the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges, how do we find the courage to step forth and declare our faith? What if the true battle is not just against our foes but within ourselves, in embracing the strength gifted to us by a higher calling? As the stone hurtled forward, a silence enveloped the valley, a hush stretching across the battlefield that contrasted sharply with the defiance brewing within David. He was the tempest in this moment, a storm wrought from faith and courage. The giant's laughter faltered, twisting into disbelief as the stone found its mark, striking Goliath squarely on the forehead. The force of the blow reverberated against the ground, shaking the very essence of the earth beneath them. Goliath staggered, his massive form beginning to tilt, and then he fell, a sound like thunder resonating upon his descent. The moment hung in the balance, as if the world held its breath and time itself bent to witness this incredible shift. David stood firm, pulse racing, a melange of triumph and reverence swelling within him. The victory was palpable, but it was so much more than the end of a warrior's challenge. It whispered of possibilities yet unseen and victories beyond the battlefield, and yet, as the giant lay lifeless on the ground, David felt a flicker of uncertainty too. Was this a true conquest, or merely a prelude to deeper struggles? The Philistines, witnessing their champion's demise, erupted into chaotic retreat, their bravado crumbling like dust before the winds of fear. With a spirit driven by the anointing of the divine, David rushed forward, not to claim glory for himself but to partake in what the Lord had orchestrated. As he stood over Goliath's body, the sword of the giant felt heavy in his grasp. It was not merely a weapon but a symbol of the burdens that lay ahead. In that crucial moment, he grasped a profound truth, that every victory leads to new challenges, for the path of faith was not a straight line but a labyrinthine journey of trust. The Israelites surged forward, a tidal wave of newfound courage washing over them. David's heart soared as they began to chase down their enemies, reclaiming ground once lost. His youthful frame was now not simply that of a shepherd but was clad in an emerging identity that would resonate throughout generations. Yet, amid this rapture, David could not shake the specter of future battles that loomed on the horizon, battles within his own heart and spirit. As he raised his arms high, the shouts of his people echoed around him, a cacophony celebrating their liberation. Triumph was sweet, yet the sweetness was tinged with an awareness of the human condition: pride, sorrow, longing for purpose. What remained unaddressed was the very essence of the challenge ahead. Was this victory truly his, or had the Almighty chosen him as a vessel to reveal a deeper reality? In that revelatory moment, as cheers surrounded him, the heavens silently observed, and David's mind drifted toward the silence that accompanies wisdom. The hearts of men are always at war against their fears, doubts, and the darkness that creeps within. What, then, was the essence of his victory if it only brought conflict anew? As he rested the heavy sword against the ground, a new question rose within him: what battles still awaited in the shadows, beyond the vanquished foes, and how would they shape the man he was destined to become? As the dust began to settle in the valley, David stood still, the applause of the Israelites ringing in his ears, yet a labyrinth of thoughts spun within him. He had just faced the mighty Goliath, a testament to the power of faith in its rawest form, yet an unease settled in his soul like a weight on his chest. What had been won, and what shadows of strife lay hidden before him? The Israelite army surged forward, emboldened by the sight of their fallen foe. Their cries of victory seemed to dance in the air, and David caught glimpses of joy reflected in their faces, a joy that was both infectious and foreign. For in the throes of this jubilation, David felt his heart drawn more to the lessons of sacrifice than to the accolades of battle. Victory felt hollow against the backdrop of the next challenges awaiting him. As the soldiers rushed past, grasping their swords and shields, David's gaze lingered on the fallen Goliath. The lifeless giant represented more than a singular defeat, he was the embodiment of many struggles that loomed in the distance. With Goliath's fall echoing amidst the stones and dust lay a whisper, a call to delve deeper into the fabric of his faith and identity. Who was he destined to be after this moment? A victor in battle or a servant of a purpose far greater than himself? Clutching the heavy sword of Goliath tightly, David took a step back, contemplating the weight of his newfound responsibility. He remembered the words of his own soul crying out to God in the fields while caring for his sheep. "It is not I, but you, O Lord, who delivers," he murmured softly. Yet it was easy to forget such promises when lauded by those who saw him as a hero. The contrast between his humble beginnings and the applause of his people felt jarring. In the depths of his heart, David acknowledged a stirring, a yearning to understand. Did victory in battle signify a triumph over giants alone, or did it beckon the haunting specter of deeper calamities, of pride, doubt, and the very fabric of the soul? What shadows hung over his spirit, whispering doubts of glory and leading him away from the steadfastness of faith? As day turned to dusk, David sought solitude. He wandered to the banks of the brook where he had once gathered stones for his sling. The water flowed steadily, a reminder of time's unyielding march. Gazing into its depths, he felt a tug of soul-searching draw him inward. The way of a leader was not just in begetting victories, but in guiding his people and understanding the weight of their burdens. A flicker of fear rose within him. Would he prove worthy of his calling, or would pride lead him astray? In that moment of reflection, he turned the sword over in his hands, feeling an unfamiliar connection with its weight. This weapon would carry stories of battle and blood, but more importantly, it echoed a narrative of humility he must carry into the future. How would he wield such a force? As a king seeking glory for himself or as a shepherd tending the flock of Israel? His thoughts spun around the next challenge looming ahead, the heart of the people he would lead. How could he ensure that their victories did not blind them to humility? Would his leadership spark fires of unity or divide them into factions of pride and arrogance? The answers danced just beyond his grasp, and as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, a new question emerged, heavy with the uncertainty of the road before him. What unseen conflicts lay ahead, not just in the hearts of enemies but in the very fabric of the lives he was called to guide? As the night unfolded, the whispers of the wind carried a distinct sense of purpose, mingling with the soft rustling of the leaves above David's head. The stars, scattered like the promises of God, twinkled above him, beckoning him to ponder deeper truths beneath the surface of victory. David knelt by the brook, the cold water lapping gently at his worn fingers, each ripple mirroring the uncertainty that pulsed through his heart. Memories flooded his mind as he sifted through the events that had led him here. The distant sounds of celebration echoed faintly, underscoring the contrast between the external joy of his people and the internal tumult he felt. His mind turned to old Samuel, the prophet who had anointed him amidst the crude ambience of his father's sheepfold. What did it mean to be chosen, he wondered? What awaited him in the halls of power that could challenge his spirit more than 10 Goliaths combined? As he gazed into the brook, he recalled the story spoken by the elders, their tales of ancestors burdened by choices that shaped nations. They understood the weight of leadership, the delicate balance between following God's will and succumbing to the allures of earthly glory. How often had kings forgotten the covenant? How easily had their hearts been swayed by pride or enmity? Gripped by these ancestral echoes, David's heart clung to a singular truth: every victory carries with it the burden of responsibility. Rising from his hunch, he felt the coolness of the air wrapping around him, a reminder of the night's solitude amid the jubilant throng behind him. He recognized that his journey would not be one of smooth paths or singular battles, rather, it would be a continuous wrestling with the shadows of human ambition, both his own and those of others he would lead. Would he be a light or a stumbling block for his people? This question gnawed at him, reverberating in the silence of the night. The recollections of his past formulated within him a strong resolve, yet doubts lingered. The image of Goliath's large, defeated form stirred within him disquieting thoughts. Was his victory merely an aggressive strike against fear, or did it expose his vulnerabilities amidst the accolades? As David turned the sword over in his palm, pondering the path forward, he sensed an uncharted battle brewing not just against tangible foes, but against the intangible foes of jealousy, insecurity, and division that had oft plagued leaders before him. In the flicker of the distant campfires, David began to understand that true leadership meant bearing the burden of unity, the delicate thread that wove people together in trust and faith. Would he be able to navigate the treacherous waters of public expectation without compromising his humble heart? Looking back at the shadows cast by the flames, David felt a familiar warmth within him, that quiet but persistent whisper of divine assurance reminding him that God's strength was made perfect in weakness. Yet, this did not hammer out the questions in his heart. If the battles would shift from the battlefield to the hearts of men, how would he measure success? Would it be defined by the number of victories or the peace he could cultivate? Could he foster an enduring legacy, one that would echo through generations, transcending merely the terror of Goliath with the truth of God? As dawn approached, casting its first light over the valley, David found fresh resolve amidst his contemplation. The silhouette of the past still shadowed him, but perhaps it reminded him less of failure and more of the battles yet to unfold. Would he emerge from these hidden conflicts not just as a king, but as a shepherd for a nation in need of guidance? With the soft light breaking the horizon, he pondered anew the lessons of this encounter. What if his greatest battles lay not in the foes he had vanquished, but in the hearts that remained uncertain, beneath the surface of his people? As he rose to meet the new dawn, a question pierced through the fragile light, echoing in the chambers of his spirit: how would he lead a people? When the true giants they faced were those forged from the very fabric of their own hearts? The sun ascended with an aura of promise, illuminating a world knotted in the complexities of human ambition and divine purpose. As David walked back toward the camp, the weight of his thoughts felt heavier than the sword at his side, a symbol more burdened than triumphant now. Campfires crackled like whispers in the wind, a chorus of voices ending their nocturnal musings and ringing in the day with fervor. The jubilant sounds of his people revealing a reality he would need to address settled uncomfortably in his chest. Thrust back into the role of a leader rather than a mere victor, David's heart beat with a rhythm not just of pride, but of an emerging humility. His mind danced between glory and responsibility. He passed through the throngs of warriors, their faces brightened by the morning rays, caught between celebration and expectation. David! A voice called to him, a young soldier named Eliab, whose reverence for his leader shimmered in his eyes. You defeated the giant. What is next for us? Shall we take the fight to the Philistines? The question hung in the air, woven together with eagerness and unyielding hope. Caught off guard, David realized he did not yet possess a ready answer. We have conquered one foe, but the true battle involves preparing our hearts for what is to come, he replied, his voice steadier than the uncertainty within. Eliab nodded, yet the glimmer of doubt shadowed his eyes, a reflection of the very uncertainty that nestled in David's heart. As the day stretched forward, David sensed a shift within the camp. Warriors were already strategizing, their hearts set on extending the victories he had initiated. But beyond the fervent fervor dwelled a threat he could not yet articulate: the envy of those who marched alongside him, the jealousy of peers who had forgotten the grace that nurtured their paths to glory. Overhearing spirited conversations, he noticed the seeds of discord being sprinkled amidst the adrenaline of their triumph, whispers of favoritism, murmurs of doubt toward his leadership, and questions about his worthiness. Wandering away from the eager ranks, David sought solace beneath a tall oak tree at the edge of the camp, its branches a protective canopy shielding him from the relentless march of expectation. As he rested his back against its sturdy trunk, its presence grounded him amidst the turbulence brewing just beneath the surface of victory. He felt the bark's rough texture against his skin, which whispered tales of resilience against the pressures seeking to break it down. In that moment of solitude, David recalled the sacredness of community prior to his rise, the shepherds and farmers who labored together, the bonds that had shaped him long before the fame. How far might I have fallen, he whispered to the winds, if I let the voices of status drown out the truths of humility. The oak stood in veneration of time, reminding him of the cycles the earth knew, of seasons that shaped growth but held no guarantees of fruit. His internal wrestling grew sharper. How could he foster unity and faith among a people whose hearts might be stirred by envy rather than loyalty? Would they remember the covenant or be overcome by the allure of temporary gains? The murmurs he had overheard returned, haunting him. How many leaders before him had stumbled in the shadows of dissent? How easy would it be for them to stumble again? Suddenly, a soft rustling drew his attention. A small bird, a sparrow, emerged from the branches and landed near his feet, hopping curiously. Here was a creature unburdened by the complexities of kingship, yet it gathered food from the ground with an unwavering tenacity. David studied its movements and felt a sense of kinship, the urgency of survival and the simplicity of focus. The bird offered a teachable moment, a stark reminder that life thrived not merely on conquest but on the everyday provision and purpose bestowed by the Creator. As David watched patiently, the sparrow took flight, soaring up into the vast sky, overwhelming him with a sense of wonder. How often had his own aspirations trapped him beneath the weight of titles instead of soaring in the covenantal promise of God's grace? Yet, as the overwhelmed thoughts began to settle, an uncomfortable realization came upon him. Had he become just another voice of clamor among his people, or could he be the one who steered them toward a deeper connection with God? As he stood, invigorated yet burdened, a question echoed through the chambers of his heart. If he was to lead his people with integrity, what sacrifices would he have to make to ensure their unity and faith remained unbroken? As the bright sun continued its ascension, David felt the weight of his choice lingering, a challenge that would soon beckon him to step boldly into uncharted waters of leadership. What inner giants must he confront to become the shepherd his people needed, safeguarding their hearts while navigating the fragile landscape of human desires? The warmth of the sun bathed the camp in golden hues, yet within David, shadows danced, unfurling fears yet unvoiced. His warriors buzzed with anticipation, each heartbeat strumming a potent hymn of pride and fervor. Still nestled beneath the oak, he felt the cool earth sink beneath him, grounding reminders that past glories couched in his memory were just that, memories, fleeting and elusive. His thoughts wandered to the day ahead, the promise of triumph yielding the questions lodged deep in his heart. What is a king if he is not a servant to his people? He mused quietly to himself. He perceived an awful truth: leadership was not adorned solely in accolades but bore the markings of sacrifice, a truth that cut deeply into the fabric of human connection. Eliab's question echoed still, the innocence of youth wrapped around a yearning for more, for battle, for glory. But beneath the surface, every victor felt the sharp edge of expectation. Would the lust for conquest blind him to the fragile web of faith he must cultivate? Suddenly, as if summoned by his inner storm, the crowd began a collective movement. They gathered at the edge of the camp, eyes trained on a horizon only David alone seemed to dread. In that moment, a figure emerged through the haze of excitement, a prophet, clad in simple robes that hung loosely over his frame, a tempest of authority overshadowing his otherwise humble presence. As the crowd quieted, David felt the prickling of unease weave through him. Prophets carried the weight of truth, often delivered not as soothing whispers but as jagged shards of God's will. My brothers, the prophet raised his voice to commandeer their attention. God speaks once more. He has seen your deeds, your bravery in battle, but do not grow proud. For as easily as he lifts you, so can he cast you down. There was a collective inhale, breaths hitching with the weight of his words. He desires hearts turned toward him, not mere warriors seeking worldly victories. There is a danger that lurks close: jealousy and discord. Beware, for they can sever you from his covenant. David felt the blood drain from his face as murmurs of dissent rippled through the crowd. An undercurrent of resentment began to trickle forth like a poisoned stream. Faces of his fellow warriors tightened, reflecting steely resolve but also the flicker of resentment. The prophet's words cut deeper than David had anticipated, revealing raw nerves festering beneath their jubilance. What must I do? The question lingered in his thoughts, a constant echo. How could he anchor them in the knowledge of God's grace rather than allow victory to breed division? God has not called us merely to win battles, the prophet continued, but to unite as one people, standing firm in faith against trials. With each phrase, David's heart sank and soared simultaneously, hope and despair engaged in a battle of their own. He charged forward, stepping into the circle that now felt like an amphitheater showcasing both faith and vulnerability. "Hear me," he compelled, raising his voice to break their tension. "Today, we stand together not just as victors, but as one family, one nation. Let us not give in to the whispers that divide us. Remember our covenant with God, a bonding greater than any battle." His voice strained against the sudden crackle of uncertainty, igniting flashes of anger beneath their camaraderie. Some warriors shifted their stance, skepticism painted across their faces. The notion of unity felt watered down by a tide of unexpression. Would they trust him? Could he lead inward as much as outward, confronting the demons littering their hearts? "Yet even I, your king, have my frailty," he whispered, revealing the crux of his vulnerability. Eyes widened, warriors leaned in closer for a moment, solidarity flickered. "I too have walked the depths of jealousy and the fear of being unworthy. If our hearts become ensnared, so might the glory of God dissolve in our envy." But even as David spoke, an unsettling itch prickled in the corners of his mind. The realization that the greatest battles often unfolded not before those on a battlefield but within. He wondered how many of his kin harbored resentments, longing to unseat the very king who had laid his soul bare before them. As silence thickened, the prophet's words echoed once more, commanding attention. "What is to be done, O David of Israel? Is it not the matter of your heart and theirs?" Words pounded in his ears, igniting curiosity and dread simultaneously. For every leader stands atop a precipice of fear, balancing the kingdom's pride and the individual hearts that make it whole. David, feeling the weight of so many hidden conflicts urging to break free, posed a question destined to ripple like a stone cast into still water. "What must I confront in myself to nurture the love that binds us, to ensure we do not become our own destroyers under the banner of supposed unity?" With the golden light cascading around him, he found himself facing not just the crowd but the essence of his leadership, the call to seek humility amidst ambition in order to protect the heart of a nation. As the golden light of dusk draped itself over the camp, painting shadows across the austere faces of his warriors, David stood rooted in thought, grappling with the tumult within. The urgency of the prophet's words buzzed in the back of his mind, echoing like a deep drumbeat laced with an unsettling rhythm, reminding him that their journey was as much inward as outward. Victory loomed on the horizon, but beneath the surface roiled fears and ambitions that gnawed at the edges of unity. With every glance exchanged among his men, David saw flickers of doubt, fragments of whispered grievances that clung to some, festering without an avenue of release. What lay hidden in hearts unexamined? He had witnessed brotherhood among these warriors, yet the potential for discord lurked like a predator in the grass, ready to pounce at the first sign of weakness. "O God," he breathed beneath his breath, feeling the weight of impending conflict even as a sense of responsibility filled him. Leadership mandated clarity, yet what clarity could arise from confusion? "Show me how to lead them through this darkness," he whispered, longing for guidance. As if in answer, his weary eyes caught sight of the distant horizon. Beyond it, he envisioned the promise of a land flowing with milk and honey, but what would it cost them? Eliab caught his gaze then, the young warrior's face illuminated by the dying light, curiosity mingling with apprehension. "What troubles you, my king?" he inquired, lowering his voice as if to shield the inquiry from the listening winds. There was no hiding within the confines of duty, and Eliab's questions acted as both a confidant's embrace and a youthful challenge wrapped in innocence. "That I fear this path might lead us to war, not with the enemy," David replied, "but within our own ranks. The beast of envy knows no mercy. We speak of unity, yet our hearts may grapple with thorns we cannot see." Eliab nodded, a flicker of understanding igniting in his eyes. "The fears of men can oftentimes be fiercer than those of swords," he responded, casting a glance over the encampment, a microcosm of potential, poised on the brink of chaos or harmony. "Indeed," David acknowledged, "and how can I, as king, mend what stretches beyond the mere sword? It is my duty to wield the heart of our fellowship, not just the weapons of defense." Eliab's youthful enthusiasm mingled with wisdom as he reflected thoughtfully. "Perhaps we must speak of these fears, not as whispers, but as truths laid bare. If not addressed, they grow like weeds, imperceptible but choking our spirit." David pondered on this notion, recognizing that silence around uncomfortable emotions often burgeoned into insurmountable divides. His warriors, whose battle cries once echoed with camaraderie, now carried veils of uncertainty that threatened their strength. They moved as a unified front, yet their hearts contained potent fragments of distrust. What do they fear? He wondered. How can I lead them if they are unwilling to reveal what burdens their hearts? With resolve kindling within him, David gathered the courage to summon his warriors for a council beneath the twilight sky. "Brothers, gather here, under the shield of the stars," he called out, the urgency in his voice igniting curiosity among them. Faces began to congregate, eyes filled with questions that shimmered brighter than the stars. As they formed a circle around their king, David felt the pull of gravity. The burden of truth loomed over them. "That I have called you here," he began, "not to speak of victories to come but to illuminate our shadows, the unspoken fears that threaten to unravel us. We stand on the precipice of great battles ahead, but unless we confront the unsettling tides within our hearts, our unity as warriors will shatter." Hands clenched, brows furrowed, the men's expressions revealed an array of emotions from curiosity to hesitation, and embers of fear lurking deep. "What rumbles within each heart?" he continued. "What whispers do you hear that stoke the fire of doubt? Let us confront them together, so our strength may flow from honesty rather than deceit." Silence enveloped them, the air thick with a tension that felt both Gothic and sacred. It was a call to arms, not merely against a foe but against the invisible rift that could fracture their very essence. Finally, one by one, the men began to speak. Their voices trembled as they spoke of fear of failing David, of losing their place, of the haunting specter of comparison that lingered too closely. An atmosphere of acceptance began to wash over the gathering. Each word offered was a lantern in the darkness, illuminating the hidden corners of doubt that previously thrived in isolation. As the heart of the council opened, David felt a swell of hope. They were confronting their battles, choosing courage over conflict, and forging bonds deeper than mere allegiance to arms. Yet a question still clung to the edges of his spirit, echoing against the resonance of their shared vulnerability. Would the unveiling of these hidden fears wield healing power, or would it widen the fractures within their fellowship? As their voices mingled under the night sky, David couldn't help but wonder who would emerge stronger from the testing darkness, their unity or the shadows yet to be acknowledged. As the words floated into the still night air, the stars shimmered like watchful eyes, bearing witness to the proceedings of that solemn assembly. David, emboldened by the genuine exchange taking place, observed the faces of his warriors, each revealing layers of vulnerability that rarely saw the light of day. The truth had given them a voice, yet amidst the catharsis, shadows danced at the fringes of their light, a reminder that acceptance did not simply dispel fear but rather invited it to join the chorus of their humanity. "Fear not," David declared, channeling both resolve and tenderness, "for in the sharing of our fears, we shall find strength. Each confession is a brick that fortifies the walls of our unity." His words hung in the air, a mixture of hope and apprehension. While the barriers had begun to crumble, uncertainty loomed. What if these revelations triggered further unrest? As men continued to speak, David noted how each fear began to intertwine. The worry of failing one another was echoed by a fear of losing identity, a warrior caught in the wildfire of comparison, the desperate chase for valor eclipsing camaraderie. It was a realization that struck David profoundly. Beneath the weight of swords and shields lay a fragile soul, as gentle and delicate as the earth beneath their feet. Emboldened by his own stirring emotion, David shared his vulnerability. "I too carry the burden of expectation, the fear of failing you, even of becoming the very king that burdens our spirits." His admission sparked a resonance among the men, and ripples of identification passed through them. They were not merely soldiers under a crown, they were brothers in a shared struggle, human beings navigating a tumultuous sea of duty and identity. As the night deepened, one voice rose above the murmurs, the tone hesitant but earnest. Abner, a seasoned warrior with deep-set lines etched by battles both won and lost. "My king," he uttered, voice barely above a whisper, "can we trust that a bond forged in our fears will carry us through the storms on the horizon? What if it becomes another weapon, another source of division?" The question hung heavily, for it reflected a truth that pulsed beneath the surface. The fear of vulnerability could transform into mistrust and, ultimately, betrayal. David paused, the gravity of Abner's concern sinking into his very bones. "That remains our greatest challenge," he replied slowly. "The path we tread leads either to unity or to deeper fractures. This vulnerability must be safeguarded like a precious seed, nurtured, watered, but never to be left unattended to grow wild. We must cultivate trust among us, and trust demands ongoing dialogue, not the silence of old fears." Nods of agreement and murmurs rose from the warriors, the weight of David's words settling into their collective spirit. In that moment, they were learning to wield a different kind of sword, one that could cut through the obscuring fog of uncertainty. They stood at a crossroads, aware that their next steps could either forge an unbreakable alliance or dissolve into discord, yet, as the council deliberated more deeply upon their shared fears, the undercurrents of unrest remained. David sensed that the revelation of such emotions, while a beginning, was merely a prelude to something more tumultuous. The hearts of men are not easily tamed nor laid bare without consequence. The latent envy and ambition that had once thrived in silence might be brewing beneath this newfound honesty, eager for the opportunity to arise anew. As they gathered their hearts and minds, David cast his gaze to the horizon where the first light of dawn began to creep in, illuminating the land of promise ahead. A deep yearning welled within him, a yearning for the days when unity had been effortless, but he realized that the true test lay not in the gift of freedom awaiting them, but in how they would question their own shadows in the journey that lay ahead. "Brothers," he finally said, full of intent, "as we continue this journey, what must we do to safeguard this circle of trust? How shall we ensure that the shadows do not slip through the cracks we have so courageously pried open tonight?" With the weight of this question woven into the fabric of their gathering, they reached yet another poignant crossroad, uncertain of where the path to their hearts might ultimately lead them. As the dawn broke over the valley, its radiant light spilled across the faces of the warriors gathered around David, illuminating not just their features but the deeper currents now unveiled among them. The air felt thick with the remnants of honest sharing, the vulnerability that echoed like a heartbeat among the assembled men. A tangible shift had occurred. Their fears, once edged with shame and silence, now blossomed into stories of shared struggle, binding them together in purpose. Yet with each shared truth, whispers of doubt still lingered, like clouds threatening to eclipse the morning sun. The ghosts of envy and ambition stirred, shifting restlessly at the corners of their souls. David sensed the palpable tension that straddled intimacy and suspicion, excitement and dread. Would the vulnerability they had unveiled shield them against new divisions, or would it deepen the fractures they so desperately sought to mend? As the first rays of sunshine streamed across the camp, illuminating the sword of Goliath still held by David, an emblem of conquest but also a heavy reminder of the conflict yet to come, a voice emerged from the assembly. It was Eliab, the young soldier whose eyes still reflected the innocence of youth and the fiery eagerness of a warrior. Stepping forward, he spoke with the tone of one seeking clarity, his heart dancing between admiration for David and the unshakable fear that clung to the hearts of many. "My king, we have spoken of courage and now of fears, but what do we do with these burdens? How do we transform our vulnerability into a path leading forward rather than forcing us to linger in despair?" At the sound of his question, the air grew still, as if time momentarily slowed to consider the weight of his words. David met Eliab's gaze, recognizing the profoundness of the inquiry. It was not simply about their vulnerabilities, it was about the very essence of leadership and fraternity in the face of future adversities. Gathering his thoughts, David felt the whisper of the Lord amid the silence. "It is said that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link," he replied, his voice steadying as he spoke. "In revealing our fears, we have forged bonds of trust, but we must not stop here. Our next task is to become stewards of each other's hearts, nurturing the seeds of vulnerability we have sown. We are called, not just to a moment of unity, but to a lifelong commitment to the burdens we bear together." The collective breath of the men released, a sigh of disbelief mingling with hope. It dawned on them that their journey was not merely a march toward conquest, it was a pilgrimage toward a deeper understanding of what it meant to lead and to serve. David continued, the fervor of the Spirit igniting his words. Let us form a council of hearts, a pact among us to uphold truth, encourage honesty, and embrace humility in service. Your fears will be my fears, as I will gladly carry your burdens as my own. It is this commitment that will fortify our unity against the storms ahead. A murmuration of agreement rippled through the assembly, each man responding with nods of dedication. David felt a surge of warmth envelop the council, a palpable affection blossoming among them as warriors no longer just linked by duty but by the deep sense of shared humanity. They each began to speak of the steps they would take, not rhetoric of glory and acclaim, but the honest acts of tending to one another's hearts. The air electrified with affirmation. As the sun shone down upon them, David's voice rose ever more confident. Let us promise to gather often, to speak not merely of victorious deeds but the shadows that seek to undo us. Together we will build into the framework of this kingdom a spirit of sincerity, one that disarms fear before it festers, because where love thrives, no raging giant shall hold sway over us. In that moment, something profound shifted, a communal spirit ignited, and David felt his heart rising with a renewed sense of purpose. He had not only rallied his men for battle against foes of flesh and blood but forged a brotherhood strengthened by vulnerability. They had committed to a journey not just of physical liberation but of spiritual awakening, wherein each man would rise not merely as a warrior but as a guardian of the other's souls. As final rays of sunlight filtered through the branches overhead, the echoes of their promises curdled the horizon with a glow of promise, a dawn that heralded not just a new day but a transformative understanding of solidarity, genuine humanity, and the power of shared faith. Throughout time, echoes of this pact would reverberate, each story of triumph etched against the fabric of their journey. David stood, breathing in the resolve and hope surrounding him. He was not just a shepherd boy turned king, but a shepherd of hearts. Would this newfound bond hold fast as they faced the trials ahead? Those thoughts lingered, but in his spirit, a quiet assurance took root, an understanding that true strength rested not in defeating giants, but in daring to confront the giants within. As they began to gather their gear and warriors' spirits rallied higher than ever before, David took the sword of Goliath and raised it into the sky, sunlight glinting off the blade. Let this be a symbol not just of battles won, but of hearts united. He proclaimed, his voice ringing clear above the camp, resonating with the truth that lay deep within their souls. For the giants we face may shift and change, but rooted in faith, we shall rise every time. The roar of their agreement resounded like a symphony across the valley, a powerful declaration of unity that swept up every heart entwined within the fabric of the journey ahead. David felt alive within the wake of their voices, echoing not just their readiness for the challenges above ground but pinning down the giants lurking within. They would not tackle mere conflicts, they would face a profound transformation of soul. In that resonant moment, the shadows of doubt and competition fell away like autumn leaves, replaced by a vibrant tapestry of hope and mutual respect, forever altered. David realized the greater truth: the victory that day was not singular, but a reawakening to the realization that they would rise, together, not as solitary titans of might but as an embodiment of greater purpose, united under the hands of the Almighty. Each step forward would beckon them to remain vigilant, gentle, and fiercely devoted to the task of lifting one another, becoming shepherds not only to their land but to each other's hearts. That day a new chapter of their unfolding story emerged, not just a history marked by battles and victories but one penned in compassion, faith, and the persistent understanding that the greatest revelations often blossom not in conquest, but in the surrender of the heart. And thus, David, bound to his people not just as their king but as their shepherd, held high the promise of a tomorrow laden with hope yet treacherously tender, a journey yet begun, steeped in miraculous double victories that would weave them irreversibly closer to their divine calling.